Hey, it's Max. You find me back in my awful setup with one of my favourite MOCs I've ever designed, not because it's the best, but because it's taken me 3 years of experimentation and refinement to get to this point, and it's of my favourite Tram. And for the first time in a while I can actually show off a physical build. Since I uploaded my first video just over a year ago, I've written 3 different scripts for a video explaining the details and mechanics of this Tram, and even recorded 1 or 2 of them, but I knew it wasn't complete, so I never finished or uploaded any of them. In this video I will attempt to go through the design process of the Tram, but keep in mind I've spent multiple years on it and there is a lot that is lost to time. Stick around because there are more time lapses of the Tram's construction later on. But as with my Tangara, this journey starts off with a completely different Tram. This is the only surviving picture of the first B class I built, and was taken in 2019, about a year before I broke it up for parts. Editing Max here, I just found a few more, including some videos. I did not know these existed. This is actually amazing. I don't know when I originally built it, but it was probably around 2016. In this picture you can also see some of my other trains and trams from around that time, including my first 8404 mod, and the front cars of my commuter train MOCs, one of which is also lost to time. As for that, I don't know. Anyway, approximately 3 years ago now I decided that I wanted to attempt another B class. At this point in time, my collection mainly consisted of modified sets, and I had almost no experience building accurate recreations of real-life things. I wanted to use the B class as an opportunity to push the limits of what I could do as a Lego builder, and because I had a limited amount of bricks, I also wanted to use it as an opportunity to learn how to use Bricklink's Studio app properly, as LDD had failed me in the past, 5 times. I started building a cross-section of the Tram with real bricks and initially settled on a 10 stud wide build so I could add a full interior. I quickly realised that this would be way too big, and that's when I stumbled across this train window piece in my collection, which perfectly matches up with the real-life Tram's windows. Before this point I was doubtful that I could actually design something like what I wanted, but after I had found the perfect window, everything clicked into place. I fired up Studio and got to work. I don't know exactly what I did because I was stupid and regrettably deleted all of my failed designs, some of which I remember were pretty cool. The only surviving records are 2 test renders of the sides that I made fairly late into the design process. To get the scale as close as possible, which to be honest was mostly an afterthought, I used, you guessed it, MPTG, as well as an interactive 3D model of the Tram on Yaotrams' website that lets you measure things. So cool, am I right? I also went out with a protractor and a ruler to measure the angle of a few things on the real Tram, including the subject of the next topic. The trickiest thing to design was of course the cab, and to do it I built a replica of the digital Tram's body in real life, just with whatever I had lying around. I still have this prototype and have used it regularly for the almost 3 years to test new ideas. I also used the prototype to design the articulation, which has been the bane of my existence since the Tram's conception. After a few days of experimenting with different ideas, I landed on one that uses toe balls with sockets built out of plates and jumpers, even though it was my least favourite idea and didn't work the best. The toe balls did have one advantage however, and that is that they raised up the articulation by half a plate over the outer bogies, which is more akin to the real Tram. Something that is not akin to the real Tram, however, is the length of the articulation, which was too long that I designed it to take R40 curves. That was version 1 of the design, mostly done, and for the second time in my life I went to Bricklink to order pieces for something that I designed entirely myself. If you're wondering what the first time was, it was for 1 slope on my original B. All that was left to do was build it, and I recorded it in the most makeshift setup I could. Since I'm not going to upload it as a separate video, here is the heavily cropped time-lapse. As it turns out, I didn't actually finish the Tram in the time-lapse, but on with the video. Alright, now that you're back, let's continue. Even before I got the pieces for the new version, I knew that it wasn't what I wanted. There were so many areas for improvement. I mean, what even is this cab? As for the articulation, who needs R40 anyway? So less than 6 months after I finished version 1, I was already pretty deep into version 2. The major improvements I made were to the roof, articulation, and cab. The original roof design had angled sides, which upon closer inspection was not the case on the real thing, so I squared it off. I attempted to redesign the articulation for a second time, but all I could do to improve its functionality was shorten it to make it more accurate to the real tram, and restrict my MOC to R72, more on that later, but still using toe balls. I had already designed a new version of the cab using the physical prototype, and had managed to do what I originally thought would be impossible. I'd found a way to put the driver's side window on the cab's angled wall, which was a detail clearly missing in the first version of the cab. I had also tiled the floor and attempted a more accurate door design, but could not find a way to make it work. So with version 2 complete, I got the pieces to modify version 1, and about a year after I originally built the tram, it was time to update it. I made sure the instructions for it on Studio, and my dad offered to print all 135 pages or so for me. I won't show the whole time lapse now, as there is a spoiler for what is probably going to be my next video at the end. Enjoy. Now that you've returned, on with the story. Almost a year after I built version 2, it was coming up on Brickvention, the best LEGO convention in this half of the world. I wasn't going to display anything at it because at the time all I really had worth sharing were a few technical builds that weren't very displayable, and of course my B-Class, but I was nowhere near happy enough with it to put it on something like that. I did, however, have the idea to record a short video and post it on YouTube, not really fulfilling a dream of 1 in 10 young people to become a YouTuber. Shortly after I uploaded the video, I started work on a third and final version of the tram that included a full interior, a more detailed roof, much better doors, and a modified articulation, still with toe balls, and a few other things that I will address in the aforementioned future video. It wasn't until about 4 months ago that I ordered the pieces, and it was another 3 months after that of sitting on them before I actually built it. You can watch the time-lapse here. You will notice a few differences, including the old-style ad hoarding on the roof and an older cab version. As I addressed in my Tangara video, I had wanted to make the tram run on a gauge 1 stud narrower than normal LEGO standard gauge, and I managed to figure out a way to build the bogies to allow for it, which finally meant I could rid myself of those pesky toe balls, but for whatever reason I hadn't included the new bogies in my rebuild. One of the things I wanted to redesign but couldn't was the cab, and literally the afternoon after I recorded the speed build I managed to come up with a solution to an issue I had been having for 2 months, allowing the updated design to work. The major problem with the old cab was that it was 1 stud too long, and the piece that I'd managed to save the new design were these old windows that I conveniently had 2 of lying around. It was also a miracle that I managed to fit the side window in, as the first cab version was the same size, but without the side window or door. That was the 4th version of the cab. We don't talk about version 3. I wanted to record the showcase video for the tram in time for Brickvention 2024, so I immediately ordered the pieces for the new cab and bogies. The order that had most of the pieces for the new cab arrived first. Just in time for the first of 2 days I had to film with Ollie, which is why you can see some pieces that aren't meant to be there in some of the shots. The second order, which contained most of the pieces for the new bogies and the pieces for the rest of the cab, arrived a day later, which is why you can see the old bogie design in some of the shots as well. Before recording the video, I of course had to make delivery. To do so, I used Adobe Illustrator to replicate the real thing as closely as possible onto the dimensions of my LEGO version, with the help of real images of the tram as well as MPTG's illustration. Because I was on a tight time and monetary budget, I used sticky paper to print out delivery. One day I will go back and print it on vinyl or something like that, but for now the crude job I've done will have to stay. So that brings us to where we are now. The things I like about the current version include the articulation, as it is the most accurate design I managed to come up with, and was especially hard to design as the side panels are half a plate wider than 6 studs on both sides, and include an interior element as well as the curves on the top, which line up almost perfectly with the real thing. I also like the doors, which look much more like the real thing than my previous attempt. It's the cab that makes it real though, because it's the centerpiece of the whole MOC and is the part that ties it all together. Actually, that would work better for the articulation, but whatever. There is one thing that those parts of the MOC all have in common, and it is unfortunately TrixBrix. That's right, I cheated a bit with the smaller details. After designing version 2, I thought I couldn't push the design any further without bending the rules a bit, and personally I think it was the right choice. 2 more things before I go. Firstly, a look at those prototypes. This is the B-Class prototype, which currently has cab versions 1 and 2 and the articulation version 3. I used this build to design and test the first 3 of the 4 articulation designs and the first 2 cab designs. This is the A-Class-like prototype that I used to design cab versions 3 and 4. You might know that I won a global award in the Brick Train Awards of 2023, and with that I got €100, approximately $160, to spend in the TrixBrix store. With that prize money I bought 1 loop of R72 track and a loop of A and D narrow gauge inserts for R72, both for my B-Class. I only need either the inner or outer inserts for my B-Class, as these allow me to run it on tracks properly with the awkward gauge I have, and as far as I know, I'm the first person crazy enough to do something like this. R72 is actually very close to the scale minimum curve radius Melbourne trams are allowed to take, being 25 meters in real life. This is the longest video I've uploaded to this channel on YouTube, so hopefully everything has been somewhat coherent. With that, thanks for watching, see you next time.